Don't put these in the dollar bin. I was talking with a friend recently about some expensive comic book runs, even where there's no keys. I think it's the best determination of how high quality and how popular your run is if you're able to move filler stuff for 10 bucks each. We're gonna ignore talking about gold and silver and even Bronze Age today. We want to look mainly at modern comics, books that are still pretty obtainable, and yet for some reason, these non-key books are extremely sought after and have a high price tag despite no key significance. I'm not going to be able to catch them all, so pop down in the comments below what you think I missed. At the 30,000 subscriber giveaway, someone's getting the first appearance of Vision. Don't forget to come into the antique shop this week. We're doing 30% off all Flash comics. All right, let's get the list started with probably the most obvious one. This is the one you could guess, Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man is hilarious. We're not even talking about the Bronze Age, like I said. I'm talking about the issues in the 300s of the original Amazing Spider-Man run. Now, Amazing Spider-Man, despite being so popular and heavily printed, is just the best of the best. It's everyone's favorite character. It's the most collected run as a solid unit, and therefore all the Amazing Spider-Man issues, even if they're not even keys, usually fetch $5 as the bare minimum. If they're extremely high grade, it's not unreasonable to see a $10 bill for that book. To this day, I still pay up to $10 on a non-key ASM if it is perfect. And I think it's a unique one to this list because some of this list is lower print counts, and this is quite obviously not that. It is solely the popularity and love for ASM driving this one. Next up, we're going to get into a string of DCs. This is Harley Quinn Volume 1. Now, the Harley Quinn Volume 1 is also fairly devoid of keys. There are some things that people consider to be a classic cover, but for the most part, it was a run that people still go gaga for, even now that the market's come down. It was not one of DC's most popular runs for the late 90s, and I think maybe because of that, that does help to push that certain run. But it is also Harley's first outing. It's her first solo series, and Harley heads go nuts for this thing. Not to mention the art is a lot of fun on that, so I get it. Next up, sort of similar, we're going to do Gotham City Sirens. It wasn't a particularly long run, but each book is like a $10 book. No key significance or whatever. It's the covers driving this thing. It's the concept of Poison Ivy and Catwoman all teaming up to do this Gotham Sirens book. It's just so fun to have them all together, and the art was fantastic. And you know when a run's not even 15 years old and it's still doing those prices, that's pretty special. Let's take a break from DC to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm not talking about the first run, I'm talking about Adventures. This was a Archie Publications run on TMNT, and it went on pretty long. I actually have a buddy that we're submitting every last one out to CGC with. It is still with my presser. These books, the non-key ones, are often $10 to $15 a pop. Not a key, whatever. And what's crazy about TMNT Adventures is people still spend that despite the condition. There's dudes out there dropping $15 on like a mid-grade TMNT Adventures number 14. That is popularity that is very rarely matched. I know guys that said that that run is the gem of their childhood, and I think it's those dudes that keep that price doing what it does. Next up is Gotham Adventures. Batman Adventures, Batman and Robin Adventures, Gotham Adventures, and Batman Adventures Volume 2 all do quite well. That whole animated series format, a lot of those books do particularly well. I personally think Gotham Adventures does the best because each book from that goes for about $10, no problem. Not a key, not a classic cover, still 10 bucks. And you just know that that is because of the love for that look, for that animated series look drives those books. A lot of people collect Batman Adventures. A lot of people collect Batman and Robin Adventures. But there's not a ton of collectors for Gotham Adventures, and that gives that one, I think, a little bit of a boost Next up, we're going to switch over to Vertigo with Sandman. Highly popular in any decade you're looking at. Recently, it became a show, it did very well, but it was way popular before that. It was groundbreaking, Eisner winning, just so classic, and some people actually bump it over even Watchmen, saying that it is the best of comic books, maybe of all time. And I can see the argument for that. So it's kind of not a surprise when I see random issues of Sandman being listed for like $8. I get it. It's just that good. Next up is one from my buddy that had to remind me of this, and it's true. Batman Beyond Volume 2. It's late 1999 into the 2000s there, and it was lesser printed. It's also a little awkward because like Volume 1, which was a miniseries, came out, and it was like right on the tail end of that. It didn't waste any time, and I think maybe it confused people, like, oh, there's a Volume 2 now? I don't know, maybe that's why it wasn't printed as much or as popular. I certainly remember that run, and I thought it was popular as hell, but all those books, again, right in the $8 to like $12 range. The non-key books too, it doesn't matter. Similar to the Gotham Adventures, it is still that animated series style, so that does sell. It is very popular. Even the Justice League animated series and any animated series comics can sometimes do well. All right, how about a comic run that I know, frankly, nothing about? I had to do some research prior to even being able to talk about this. This is Faust. I think one of the reasons I know so little about it is the reason why many know so little about it. It got popular much more recently, and it wasn't a particularly long run. It was in the late 89, I think, into 90. And there's less than 5,000 copies of each single issue, especially nearer to the end of the run. So it is definitely scarce. And that is one that I think is driven the most by the scarcity out of anything on this list. Finding them in general is already tough. Finding them in high grade is even tougher. All the prices that you see at like $20 a hit. If you're a diehard enough fan, you need those books if you're trying to collect the full run, so what are you gonna do? Next up is Sabrina. Now, the funny thing about this teenage witch character is so many Archie titles, most sellers have a hard time moving for 50 cents. Archie was very popular. All of the other runs and spin-offs were quite popular as well. Betty and Veronica, Jughead's Book of Laughs, all of that pales in comparison to Sabrina the Teenage Witch's popularity, which actually came in the 70s and went to the 80s. So I said we weren't going to talk about any Bronze Age, but I'm making a slight exception here because this goes into a little bit later on. It's just such a popular character. It's very clear that Sabrina the Teenage Witch has more of a collecting notoriety to it rather than Betty, Jughead, Veronica, all those guys. And I love seeing that because that to me is really cool to see Sabrina have such a lasting appeal like that. Does make her books have a little pricey value though, so watch out. Next up is Static. We're talking about Static Shock here, the milestone character. Now, it was not a particularly long run, but it hit the ground running. It was extremely popular. It made its way into a show. It eventually became DC canon. Static is extremely popular, especially during a time where there weren't enough, at least unique, black or diversified DC characters at the time. So this was really met with some serious welcome. Icon and Hardware, not so much. I'm really talking about Static here. All those non-key filler books, $10. Remember that when you go dollar bin hunting. Before we hit number one, I'm going to give you 3 honorable mentions. Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, which is technically Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 3. That's the very Miles Morales heavy run, and there are a bunch of keys in that run, but even the ones that aren't, like $15 books each, dude, it's crazy. Batman 400 to 600. For some reason, 600 to 700, you find that in dollar bins all the time, but high grade 400 to 600 is very desirable. Everybody wants to grab it, and it's maybe not like $10, but it's about $5, $6, $7, or $8 for those really sharp copies of Batman filler. Just like Amazing Spider-Man, people want their bats. And last honorable mention goes to the Saga of Swamp Thing arc. This is the Alan Moore classic, but even after he left, it was still popular. Saga of Swamp Thing books usually move for like anywhere from $5 to $10 all day. It's the quality of the story that gives it that decade-lasting appeal. Let's hit you with number one, and unfortunately, my unlucky ass is a collector of this. Sonic the Hedgehog by Archie. I've talked about it on this channel before. Sonic the Hedgehog is a nightmare to collect. It was lower print run, but not anywhere near as low as Faust. People definitely read these, but still, every single Sonic book, even the filler crap, and almost never is high grade, I swear. It's always like mid-grade. $12, $15, $20, $25 a book, no problem. Let me tell you something, it is really frustrating being a Sonic collector. Why did I have to fall in love with that run? Why couldn't I have liked X-Force? Sonic the Hedgehog is a nightmare from a collector's standpoint. You could, if you really try to go for every last issue, not to mention some of the ones that are keys get really expensive, like that first appearance of Shadow the Hedgehog, yikes, will bleed your wallet dry. I did ridiculously well on a sale recently, and I took every dime from that and put it into a lead I found with Sonic, and I watched it all go bye-bye. Some of these runs, man, will leave you penniless, but they're so good, you have to get them. I love me some high-quality comic books, and I love when I see non-filler keys commanding a value solely because of how good it is. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I love you all, and keep on hunting.
Make sure to come down to Sentiment Depot Antiques and Collectibles, where I'm set up with all of my comics, located at 238 West Delaware Ave, Pennington, New Jersey. Open every day except for Monday and Tuesday. Enjoy 10% off from Wednesday to Friday. See you there.